It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new city, a cozy apartment tucked away on a quiet street in Cambridge, UK. The kind of place where the walls held stories and the floors creaked like they remembered things you hadn't lived yet. Lena, 25, stepped into the flat for the first time, her hands gripping the last box of books, her heart hopeful and tired. Daniel, her fiancé, smiled as he held the door open. "Home," he said softly. She smiled back. She wanted to believe it. After everything they'd been through, the stress, the long distance, the late night calls, this was supposed to be peace. The apartment had charm: exposed brick, large windows, warm light. But it also had something else: a long hallway, and at the end of it, a single dark wooden door, locked. "Don't worry about that one," Daniel said quickly when she noticed it. "Just storage. It's nothing." She didn't question it, not then. There was so much love in his eyes, and she was too tired to care about locked doors. But that night, as she lay beside him, her eyes kept drifting down that hallway, toward the door, toward the quiet. And in her chest, something small and uneasy began to settle. Not loud enough to name, but just enough to keep her from sleeping. The morning sun slipped in through the curtains, painting the kitchen in warm light. Lena stood by the stove, stirring tea absently, her thoughts still tangled in the night before. Daniel walked in, hair messy, sleepy smile on his face. He kissed her forehead like everything was perfect, like nothing was strange, but she couldn't ignore it anymore. "That room," she said quietly. "Why is it locked?" He didn't answer at first. He just grabbed a cup and sat down, his smile fading. Then, without looking up, he said, "It's just old stuff, Lena, from years ago. Nothing worth opening." She waited for more, a reason, a story, even a laugh. But he stayed silent. "You never mentioned it before," she pushed gently. "What kind of stuff?" That's when he looked up, and his voice changed. "Please," he said, slower now, "just don't open that door. Promise me." His tone wasn't angry, it wasn't scared either. It was something else, like warning wrapped in affection, like a secret dressed as concern. Lena hesitated. She nodded, but something about the way he looked at her, like he was measuring her trust, made the promise feel heavier than it should have. That door was no longer just a door. It had become a silence between them. And silence has a way of echoing louder over time. Days passed, and the apartment began to feel like home. Warm meals, soft blankets, shared laughter. But the door never stopped watching her. It stood at the end of the hallway like a shadow that didn't move, unopened, untouched, unspoken. At first, Lena tried not to think about it. She focused on decorating the living room, unpacking books, learning the rhythm of Daniel's world. But little things began to shift. Daniel became quieter. He came home later. Sometimes his clothes smelled like rain, even when it hadn't rained. He kept his phone close, face down, always locked, and when she asked about his day, he gave answers that felt like half sentences, like the truth had been trimmed down to fit in his mouth. Then one evening, while dusting the hallway shelf, she glanced at the door again and noticed something odd. A faint scrape near the keyhole, fresh, like someone had tried unlocking it recently, or locking it again. She bent closer, held her breath, put her hand on the doorknob just for a second. It was cold, colder than the rest of the house. Daniel called from the kitchen and she pulled her hand away. She told herself it was nothing, just a door, just storage, just a promise she had made. But curiosity isn't quiet for long, especially when the silence starts to feel like a lie. It was past midnight. The apartment was still. Only the hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock filled the silence. Lena lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Daniel slept beside her, his breath steady, peaceful, as if nothing in the world was wrong. But her heart wouldn't rest. There it was, again, a sound, soft, subtle, but real. She sat up slowly, held her breath, scratch, scratch, then silence. It came from the hallway, from the door. She whispered, "Daniel?" No answer. He didn't move, didn't stir. She slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound. Her bare feet touched the cold wooden floor, her heartbeat thudding louder than her footsteps. The hallway was darker than usual. The light at the end flickered, once, then stopped. The door stood closed, still, silent again. She leaned in, pressing her ear gently to the wood. Nothing. She stayed like that for a few seconds, then turned to leave, and heard it again, a whisper, or maybe just a breath. From the other side, she froze, her eyes filled with panic, not full fear, but the kind that sits quietly in your stomach and grows. Behind her, Daniel's voice suddenly cut through the hallway. "Lena?" She jumped, turned. He stood at the edge of the darkness, eyes heavy with sleep, but voice sharp. "What are you doing?" She fumbled. I heard something." He stared at her for a long moment, then said softly, "You're just tired. Come back to bed." And she did, but she didn't sleep. Because tired people imagine things. But doors, they don't whisper on their own. The next morning came with golden sunlight, but it did nothing to warm Lena's chest. She moved around the kitchen in silence, her eyes heavy, her heart heavier. Daniel appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist like nothing had happened. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, a lie, too easy now. He handed her a coffee, then leaned on the counter, scrolling through his phone. They talked, about nothing mostly, his meetings, her plans, the weather. Just enough words to fill the space. Then, as he reached for his jacket, she heard him murmur, "I should have just given it to her," before she left. Her spoon paused mid-stir. She looked up slowly. "Given what? To who?" Daniel froze. Just for a second, but enough. He blinked, recovered quickly, and smiled. "What? Oh, I meant the old landlord. I forgot to return the key to that storage room when the last tenant left. He sipped his coffee too fast, didn't meet her eyes. Lena tried to smile, tried to let it go, but that one word, her, kept ringing in her ears like an unanswered question. She didn't know who she was, but she knew one thing for certain now. That room wasn't just storage, and she hadn't just left. The rain tapped gently against the windows that afternoon. Lena sat alone in the living room, pretending to read, but her mind was trapped in replay. Before she left, the words looped endlessly, echoing louder the more she tried to ignore them. She stood, restless, and began tidying the apartment, anything to distract her thoughts. A dusty bookshelf in the hallway caught her eye. She hadn't touched it since they moved in. Old books lined the shelves, classics, manuals, things Daniel never seemed to read. She pulled one down at random, a leather-bound novel stiff with age. It fell open in her hands and something slipped out, a photograph. Worn edges, faded color, but the image was clear. A woman, dark hair, gentle smile, standing in front of a door, the very one at the end of their hallway. Lena stared at it, breath catching in her throat. The woman was holding a small box in her hands. A gift? A memory? She flipped the photo over. There, in neat handwriting, "For you, always, E." Lena blinked hard. The photo trembled slightly in her fingers. Who was this woman? Why was she standing by that door? Why had Daniel hidden the picture in a forgotten book? She slipped the photo into her pocket, her heart beating faster now. Because finding secrets by accident means they were meant to stay hidden. And once you hold someone's past in your hands, you can't unsee it. You can only choose what to do next. Evening arrived with the smell of rain and a low hum of traffic outside. Lena sat on the couch, legs folded, the photograph resting silently in her lap. She had held it all day, turned it over, stared at the handwriting again and again. "For you always, E." Daniel walked in just after 7, shaking water from his coat, his usual smile in place. But she didn't smile back. Instead, she held up the photo, quietly. No words, just the truth, now visible in her hands. He paused mid-step, his eyes locked on the picture, and for the first time, his mask slipped. Just a flicker. Then came the lie. "Where did you find that?" His voice wasn't angry, it was careful, too careful. "In one of your books," Lena said softly. "Who is she, Daniel?" He looked down, ran a hand through his hair. "It's nothing, just someone I used to know, before you." Then why was she standing in front of that door? The question landed like thunder. The silence afterwards said more than his words ever could. "Lena," he said finally, "can we not do this? You're digging through things that don't matter anymore. That room, it's not important. She's not important." "You hid her," Lena whispered. "That's not nothing." His jaw clenched. He walked past her without answering and disappeared into the bedroom, shutting the door behind him. Lena sat alone. The apartment felt colder now, the walls tighter. And that door at the end of the hallway, somehow louder in its silence. When someone avoids a truth, it's often because the truth is too dangerous to say. And sometimes, the moment you ask a question, you already know the answer. The next morning, the silence between them was thick. Daniel barely spoke. He left early, saying something about a meeting, his voice flat, his eyes unreadable. Lena stood by the window long after he left, the sound of the door closing echoing like a goodbye that hadn't happened yet. She knew she wouldn't wait much longer, not with that photograph in her pocket, not with the questions twisting in her chest like vines. She walked down the hallway again, stopped in front of the door, still locked, still cold. Then, as if guided by instinct, she turned and walked to the coat rack. Daniel's jacket, the one he wore almost every day, still hung there. Heavy, familiar. She slipped her hand into the inner pocket and froze. Her fingers brushed against something small, cold, metal, a key. It slid out easily, almost too easily, like it had been waiting for her. Lena stared at it in her palm, silver, simple, but it buzzed with the weight of answers she wasn't sure she wanted. She walked slowly back down the hall, heart pounding, stood before the door again. Her hand trembled as she raised the key to the lock. She didn't turn it, not yet. She leaned in close, rested her forehead gently against the wood, and whispered, "Who are you?" The silence didn't answer, but it welcomed her. Some doors aren't locked to keep you out. They're locked to keep something in. And once you hold the key, you can never pretend you didn't. Lena stood still, key in hand, heart loud enough to drown out everything else. The hallway was silent, still. Even the air felt heavier, like the walls were holding their breath with her. She looked back once, toward the kitchen, the bedroom, the life she thought she understood. Then, slowly, deliberately, she slid the key into the lock. Click. The sound was sharper than it should have been. The knob turned with a soft resistance, like the door hadn't been opened in a long, long time. Lena pushed. The door creaked open, revealing a room shrouded in muted light and stale air. Dust danced in the glow from a half-covered window. The space smelled of old perfume and paper. She stepped in and froze. Everything was still, perfectly placed. A small bed, neatly made, a desk with a closed journal, a vase with dried flowers now colorless, a coat draped gently over a chair, untouched by time. The walls were covered in photos, dozens of them, all of the same woman, the one from the photograph, smiling, laughing, holding Daniel's hand. Lena's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a storage room. It was a memorial, a frozen echo of someone loved, someone missed. But then, her eyes locked on something else. On the floor near the bed, a small box. Inside it, letters, dozens, maybe more, all addressed to Evelyn, and all signed D. This wasn't just a room, it was a shrine. And Lena had just stepped into a story she was never meant to read.
The room whispered with memory. Lena stood, motionless, surrounded by someone else's life. A woman who had once slept here, smiled here, maybe even cried here. A woman Daniel had never truly let go of. Her eyes were drawn to the desk, dusty, undisturbed. and in the center of it, a worn, leather-bound journal. She reached for it with trembling hands. Its cover was cracked, the edges faded. It opened easily, like it had been waiting. Inside, the handwriting was soft and flowing, personal, intimate. Day 3. He brought me flowers today. Said I looked beautiful even when I cried. I want to believe him. I really do. Day 12. Sometimes he gets quiet. I don't know why. I ask questions, and he just leaves. Day 27. I opened the box. He said it wasn't mine, but it had my name on it. Day 40. I'm scared to leave. He says he loves me, but love shouldn't feel like a locked door. Day 45. If anyone finds this, know that I tried. I tried to love him. I tried to stay. He doesn't like when I ask questions. Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. Each entry pulsed with sorrow, confusion, and fear. She flipped toward the back. The last page was blank, except for one line scrawled in shaky ink. He said no one else would love me like he does. Her hand went cold. The silence around her now felt different, heavier, like it was holding in a scream. She turned slowly, looking around the room again. This wasn't a tribute. This was a warning. And the story Daniel told her, the one built on love and new beginnings, was beginning to rot at the edges. The room felt colder now. Lena stood still, the journal still open in her hands, the words burned into her mind. She didn't hear the front door open. She didn't hear his footsteps, not until his voice filled the hallway, calm, casual, like nothing had changed. Lena? She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Then his voice came again, closer now. I forgot my charger, He stopped, right at the doorway, staring at her. She turned slowly, his eyes locked on the journal in her hands, on the room behind her, on the memories she was never meant to see. And in that moment, his face changed, not with anger, not with panic, with something worse, disappointment. You said you wouldn't open it, he said softly, almost like a parent scolding a child. Lena couldn't speak. She searched his face for guilt, regret, anything, but all she saw was cold calm. How long have you been coming in here? She whispered. Daniel stepped inside, slowly. It doesn't matter now. You lied to me, she said, louder this time. Who was she? Evelyn? What happened to her? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the journal gently, deliberately, and closed it with one hand. You weren't supposed to know any of this. His voice was flat now, void of softness, void of love. Lena backed up a step. What happened to her, Daniel? Silence. Then he looked at her, eyes distant. She left me. A pause, a flicker of something darker in his voice. Just like you will. And in that single sentence, Lena saw the truth. She wasn't the first, and if she stayed, she wouldn't be the last. Lena barely slept that night. She sat on the edge of the bed, still and silent, the journal now hidden in her bag, a truth she couldn't unsee. Daniel lay beside her, motionless, too still, too quiet, but she felt his eyes open the moment she closed hers. By morning, she knew she had to leave. She waited until he stepped out for a walk. He said he needed air. But even his voice felt staged now, like every word was rehearsed. The moment the door clicked shut, Lena moved fast. She grabbed her backpack, shoved in the journal, the photo, her wallet. She didn't take much. She didn't need much. She just needed to be gone. She ran to the front door, turned the knob, locked. Strange. She reached for the key rack. Empty. All of it, the spare keys, the car fob, gone. Her pulse spiked. She turned to the window. Maybe she could call someone, ask for help. But her phone wasn't in her bag. She sprinted to the kitchen. Nothing. The counters were clean, too clean. And then, on the fridge, she saw it. A note, in Daniel's handwriting. You said you'd never leave me either. Lena stared at it, heart thudding like a warning drum in her chest. She backed away slowly. The apartment suddenly didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a trap. Love should never come with a lock, and trust should never cost your freedom. But now Lena realized she might already be too late. Lena locked the bedroom door behind her, heart racing. She paced in silence, the sound of her own breathing louder than anything else. The walls felt closer now, like they were listening. She sat on the floor, back against the dresser, trying to think, trying to breathe. That's when she remembered the letters, the box in the locked room. She had only seen the top ones, only read the journal. She crept back toward the door, careful, listening. The apartment was still. Daniel wasn't back yet. Or he was waiting. She couldn't be sure anymore. She opened the box again, hands shaking, and pulled out a stack of papers tied together with a thin ribbon. Not from Daniel, from Evelyn. Written in trembling ink, one letter stood out, unfinished, torn at the bottom. If someone finds this, please know. I tried to leave. I tried to warn the next girl. He watches everything. He takes the keys. He waits for them to trust him. He loves too much, or maybe not at all. The window, behind the wardrobe. There's a way out. If you find this, run. Lena blinked hard. She turned to the corner of the room. The wardrobe. She rushed over, pulled at it. It scraped loudly against the wooden floor. Behind it, a narrow pane of glass, frosted, cracked, but there. An old service window, the kind builders forget to remove. Her hands flew to the latch, stuck, but movable. Her heart skipped. She had a way out. In that moment, Evelyn wasn't just a memory anymore. She was a whisper in Lena's ear, saying, "Go, now." Lena's hands were raw from pulling at the rusted latch. The tiny window barely opened, its edges sealed by time and silence. But she didn't stop. Every scrape of metal against wood felt like a scream, but she pushed through the fear. Behind her, the apartment remained quiet, but not for long. She could feel it.
a shift in the air, a tension, like something was moving closer. The latch finally gave way with a sharp snap. The window creaked open just enough, just wide enough for her to squeeze through. She grabbed her bag, one leg out, then the other. Her breath was shaky. The cold air outside stung her face, but it was real. It was freedom. Then, click, the front door opened. Daniel's voice echoed down the hall. Lena? Her heart nearly stopped. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The floor creaked as he stepped inside. She pushed harder, dragging herself through the narrow space. Dust scratched her arms. Glass scraped her side. Lena. His voice was calmer now, too calm. You don't need to do this. She didn't look back. She dropped through the window and landed hard on the cold gravel below. She scrambled to her feet, ran, didn't look back once. Behind her, the window stood open, and Daniel's shadow filled the frame. He didn't chase her. He just watched. Because sometimes predators don't run after you. They wait for you to come back. And deep down, Lena knew this wasn't over. The hospital lights were too bright, too clean, too quiet. Lena sat across from the counselor, her hands wrapped around a warm paper cup, but she hadn't taken a sip. She had been found hours after her escape, shivering, bruised, terrified. She had told the police everything, the room, the photos, the journal. They listened. They even went to the apartment. But when they got there, the locked room was empty. No photos, no letters, no journal. Just a clean blank space. Fresh paint, new locks, no Evelyn, no proof. The officer's words rang in her ears. He says you've been under stress, that maybe you imagined parts of it. She wanted to scream, but her voice was tired now, worn down by shadows and silence. The counselor smiled gently. You're safe now, Lena. She nodded, but inside, she wasn't sure. She reached into her bag, slowly, quietly, and pulled out the torn page she had hidden in her coat. Evelyn's handwriting, still real, still whispering. If someone finds this, run. Lena folded the page and held it close to her chest. And for a moment, she let herself believe she had escaped. But as she looked out the window, a black car parked across the street, engine off, driver waiting, and Daniel just watching. Because some doors once opened never truly close, and some stories don't end, they just begin again.